I just got the most shocking text from my stepmother, demanding her family share of my inheritance. The same woman who convinced my father to leave me with Grandma when I was only 5 years old. 23 years of barely acknowledging my existence, and now that Grandma has passed away suddenly, I matter. My father abandoned me once for his new family, and now they want to take the only security I have ever known. Before I get into how my father abandoned me, and now my stepmother wants to take the only security I have ever had, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who only want you for what you have. Life started out pretty normally for me. I grew up in a modest suburban home in Scottsdale, Arizona, with my mom and dad. We were not wealthy, but we were happy. My earliest memories are filled with weekend trips to the local park, my mom teaching me to ride a bike with training wheels and my dad grilling burgers in our small backyard. They both worked full-time, mom as a nurse and dad in sales, but they always made time for me. Everything changed when I was 4. Mom started getting headaches that would not go away. After weeks of doctor's appointments and tests, we got the devastating news. Brain tumor, terminal, 6 months at most. I was too young to fully understand, but I remember the hushed conversations, the quiet crying at night, and how Mom tried to smile through it all. She lasted 4 months. I remember sitting on Dad's lap at the funeral, confused about why Mom was in a box and why everyone was crying. Dad tried his best at first. He took family leave from work, learned to cook simple meals, and would read me the same bedtime stories Mom used to. But the grief consumed him. He would often sit staring at nothing, forgetting I was even there. 6 months after Mom died, Dad introduced me to Margot. She had long blonde hair, bright red nails, and wore clothes that sparkled. She worked at his office and had been helping him catch up after his leave. I remember how she bent down to my level the first time we met and said, "You poor little thing," in a voice that sounded sweet but made me uncomfortable. Dad changed after Margot came into our lives. He became distant and impatient with me. Simple things like helping with my shoes or answering my endless questions about when Mom was coming back became too much for him. I started hearing phrases like "big boy" and "time to grow up" whenever I needed help or showed any emotion. Margot was never openly mean, but there was something cold in how she looked at me. She would make comments to Dad when she thought I could not hear. Boys really need a woman's touch, but one who can start fresh. Children adapt so quickly at this age. Your life has been on hold long enough, Douglas. 3 months after meeting Margot on a Sunday morning, Dad sat me down at our kitchen table. He explained they were getting married and moving to a new house in Phoenix. Then came the words that would change my life forever. "Virgil, Margot, and I need to take a break from parenting right now. We are going to focus on building our life together, and Grandma Ellie is going to take care of you for a little while." That afternoon, he packed 1 suitcase of my clothes and toys. I remember asking if I could bring my bicycle, and Dad said Grandma did not have room for it. He promised to buy me a new one when I came back home. That never happened. Grandma Ellie lived 2 hours away in Tucson in a small 1-bedroom house with a garden out back. I had only met her a handful of times before Mom died. She was my mom's mother, and Dad had never been particularly close to her. When we arrived, she hugged me tightly and told me I was going to have a wonderful time with her. I stood in her driveway holding her weathered hand in my small one, watching Dad's car disappear down the street. "When is he coming back?" I asked. Grandma squeezed my hand and said, "Soon, sweetheart." Very soon. Dad promised to visit every weekend. That quickly became once a month. Then, once every few months. Phone calls followed the same pattern. By the time I turned 7, I was lucky to see him twice a year. Each time, Margot would come along, checking her watch frequently and finding reasons why they needed to leave early. Grandma never spoke ill of my father in front of me, though I sometimes heard her crying at night. She was in her 60s when I came to live with her, and she was living on Social Security and a small pension from her years as a school secretary. Money was tight, but she never let me feel it. I discovered years later that she had taken a part-time job at the local library when I was in 1st grade just to afford my school supplies and clothes. She would work while I was at school, so I never knew she was struggling. She just told me she volunteered there because she loved books. Grandma Ellie became my world. She taught me to garden in her small backyard, showing me how to nurture tomato plants and zucchini. She would say, "Things that grow need patience and love, Virgil," just like little boys. Her hands were always busy, either cooking, cleaning, or mending my clothes, but she never complained. I developed my own coping mechanisms for dealing with the abandonment. I collected rocks and pebbles from everywhere we went, creating elaborate stories about each one. I drew constantly, mostly pictures of imaginary families. Grandma would hang them all on her refrigerator even as they became so numerous that the door was barely visible. School was tough. Kids can be cruel, especially to the boy without parents. I got into a few fights defending myself against taunts. Grandma never got angry when I came home with a black eye or torn shirt. She would clean me up, remind me that fighting was not the answer, but also acknowledge that standing up for yourself was important. The first Christmas after I moved in with Grandma, Dad promised he would come. We baked cookies and decorated Grandma's small artificial tree. I made him a special card with a drawing of all four of us, including Margot as a family. He called that morning to say something had come up at work. I later saw on Margot's social media that they had taken a family trip to Hawaii. I did not know what family meant since I was clearly not included. Grandma created special birthday traditions to make up for Dad's absence. She would wake me up with pancakes shaped like whatever I was interested in that year: dinosaurs, rockets, sports balls. She would hide small presents around the house for me to find throughout the day. She could not afford much, but she made each birthday magical. One night when I was 8, I overheard Grandma on the phone. Her voice was unlike anything I had ever heard from her, sharp and angry. "Douglas, he is your son. Not some obligation you can fulfill with a birthday card and 30 minutes on the phone every few months. He deserves better than this. We both know what Margot thinks about him, but you are his father. Act like it." She hung up and cried in the kitchen, not knowing I was listening from the hallway. My teenage years brought a different kind of pain. I was old enough to understand exactly what had happened, and resentment began to build. Who abandons their child after their mother dies? What kind of man chooses a new woman over his own son? These questions haunted me, along with the deeper ones about my own worth. If my own father did not want me, what did that say about me? When I was 13, Dad insisted I come for Thanksgiving dinner at their home in Phoenix. Grandma drove me there and planned to pick me up the next day. The house was enormous compared to Grandma's modest home with a swimming pool and 3-car garage. Inside, everything was immaculate, like something from a magazine. I met my half-siblings for the first time that day. Jackson was 7 and Lily was 5. They had everything I had ever wanted, not just materially, but in terms of their father's attention. Dad ruffled Jackson's hair and swung Lily around in circles while barely making eye contact with me. Margot was all smiles and backhanded compliments. "My, you have grown so tall. Ellie must be feeding you well on her limited budget." Or, "You look so much like your mother, no wonder Douglas finds it difficult sometimes." Each comment designed to remind me I was an outsider. That night I slept in their guest room, surrounded by family photos that did not include me. There were professional portraits of the 4 of them hanging in the hallway: Dad, Margot, Jackson, and Lily, the real family. I was the inconvenient reminder of his past. Despite the pain, Grandma always encouraged forgiveness. "Holding on to anger only hurts you, Virgil. Your father has made terrible choices, but you can choose differently." She never pushed me to have a relationship with him, but she kept the door open for it. I threw myself into school, determined to build a future for myself. If Dad was not going to support me, I would make it on my own. I joined every club that did not require expensive equipment, studied late into the night, and volunteered at the library where Grandma worked. My grades were excellent, and teachers began to take notice. Mrs. Rodriguez, my high school counselor, became an important mentor. She recognized my potential and started talking to me about college possibilities. She helped me navigate scholarship applications and financial aid forms, things Grandma tried to help with but found overwhelming. When I graduated high school, a salutatorian, Dad promised to attend the ceremony. I actually believed him, saving him a seat in the family section. Grandma sat alone there, dabbing tears throughout my speech. Dad texted an hour after the ceremony ended, with some excuse about Lily having a dance recital the same day. It was the last time I expected anything from him. That night, Grandma revealed something that brought me to tears. She had been saving money for my college fund since I was 5 years old, setting aside small amounts from her already tight budget. She had managed to save $8,000. "I always knew you were destined for great things, Virgil," she said. "I wanted to make sure I did my part to help you get there." I was accepted to Arizona State with a partial scholarship. Between that Grandma's savings financial aid and a part-time job at the campus bookstore, I managed to make it work. I lived in the cheapest dorm available, and ate more ramen than I care to remember, but I was getting an education. College was demanding, especially while working 20 hours a week, but I maintained a spot on the dean's list every semester. I majored in accounting, a field that promised stability, something I craved after years of uncertainty. During my sophomore year, I discovered something that broke my heart. Grandma had been quietly selling pieces of her jewelry, family heirlooms, to help with my education expenses. I found a receipt from a pawn shop when I was helping her organize some papers. When confronted, she simply said, "They are just things, Virgil. Your future is what matters." That same year, Dad made an unexpected attempt at reconciliation. He started calling more regularly, even visited campus once for lunch. He talked about regrets and second chances. I was cautiously optimistic that perhaps he was finally ready to be a father. It did not last long. Margot always found ways to sabotage our reconnection. There were always family emergencies requiring Dad's immediate attention whenever we had plans. My calls would go straight to voicemail when I knew she was home. Eventually, Dad's efforts faded, and we returned to our semi-annual phone calls. When I was a senior, I noticed Grandma becoming more forgetful, more tired. She brushed off my concerns, but I knew something was wrong. After much insistence, she finally saw a doctor and was diagnosed with early-stage heart failure. She had been hiding her symptoms to avoid worrying me during finals. I graduated with honors and immediately moved back to Tucson. I found a job as a junior accountant at a local firm, allowing me to live with Grandma and help care for her. Her condition was manageable with medication, but she needed more help around the house. Dad would visit once or twice a year, always with the same pattern. He would arrive with small gifts, ask general questions about my life, without really listening to the answers, and inevitably mention some financial struggle before leaving. "Jackson's private school tuition has increased again. Lily needs braces. The market has been tough on my investments." Each visit ended with a request to help the family out, as if I had not been explicitly excluded from that category for most of my life. During one of his rare visits, Grandma pulled me aside after he left. She was 80 by then, her health declining, but her mind still sharp. "Virgil, I need to tell you something. My will leaves everything to you. The house, my savings, the investments your grandfather left me. It is not much compared to what Douglas has, but it is all yours. You are the one who has been here, who has cared for me. You deserve it." Grandma's health took a sharp decline after her 80th birthday. She developed pneumonia that her weakened heart could not fight. I took a leave of absence from work to care for her, spending days and nights by her hospital bed. The nurses commented on my dedication, but to me it was simply returning the love she had shown me for over 2 decades. Dad came to visit once during her 2-week hospital stay. He brought Margot, who spent most of the visit checking her phone and examining the medical charts when the nurses were not looking. They stayed less than an hour, with Dad patting my shoulder awkwardly before leaving. "Let us know if there is anything we can do," he said, knowing he would do nothing. Grandma had several lucid days near the end where we talked about everything. She made me promise to use whatever she left me to build the life I deserved. "You have overcome so much, Virgil. I am so proud of the man you have become. Promise me you will not let the past define your future." She passed peacefully one evening as I held her hand. I had stepped out briefly to use the restroom, and when I returned, I could tell something had changed. I sat with her, holding her hand, telling her it was okay to let go, that I would be all right. She took one final breath and was gone. I called Dad immediately, but got his voicemail. He called back the next morning. I handled all the funeral arrangements myself. Dad offered to chip in, but never actually sent any money. The funeral was small but beautiful, filled with Grandma's friends from the library, neighbors, and a few of my colleagues who had heard stories about the amazing woman who raised me. Margot arrived at the funeral in a designer black dress that probably cost more than all the funeral expenses combined. She made a show of dabbing at dry eyes and telling everyone how Ellie was like a mother to her too, despite having spent less than 48 hours in her company over 20 years. Dad gave an uncomfortable eulogy that focused more on his own childhood memories than on Grandma's life. He mentioned her stepping in to help with Virgil, as if she had simply babysit occasionally, not raised me from kindergarten through adulthood. A week after the funeral, Grandma's attorney called us all in for the reading of the will. I knew what to expect, but the actual details surprised even me. Grandma had been more financially savvy than I realized. Between the house, which had appreciated significantly, her modest savings, and some investments my grandfather had made decades ago, the estate was worth about $675,000. Not a fortune by any means, but more than I had ever expected. The moment the attorney finished explaining the will, Margot's demeanor changed completely. She turned to me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Virgil, we are so grateful that Mom thought of you this way. Of course we know she would want us to all benefit as family." I simply nodded, too emotional to respond. Dad looked uncomfortable but said nothing. We parted ways with promises to talk soon. The first aggressive phone call came 3 days later. Margot, her voice syrupy sweet, at first explained how Jackson was starting college next year, and Lily had her heart set on a study abroad program. "Your father has done so much for you over the years," she said, ignoring all evidence to the contrary. "The right thing would be to share this windfall with your siblings. After all, they are your blood too." When I politely declined, explaining that Grandma had been explicit about her wishes, Margot's tone changed instantly. "Douglas has parental rights here. Ellie had no business leaving everything to you when Douglas is her logical next of kin." Dad called the next day, his approach softer, but the message the same. "I know my mother would want to see all her grandchildren benefit Virgil. Sharing would be nice." He could not even stand firmly in his own greed, hiding instead behind Margot's demands. Over the next 2 weeks, Margot sent increasingly aggressive texts. "We expect at least half of the inheritance. Your father is prepared to contest the will. Family takes care of family. Or have you forgotten that concept?" Each message more entitled than the last. I met with Grandma's attorney, a kind but firm woman in her 60s who had been Grandma's friend for decades. She assured me the will was ironclad. "Ellie anticipated this might happen," she told me. "She kept meticulous records of how little Douglas contributed to your upbringing, as well as documentation of Margot's previous attempts to borrow money from her under false pretenses." This was news to me. Apparently, Margot had approached Grandma several times over the years, claiming financial hardships and asking for loans that were never repaid. Grandma had kept every communication, every canceled check, creating a clear pattern of exploitation attempts. The situation escalated when Margot showed up unannounced at Grandma's house, now my house, claiming she wanted to help inventory family heirlooms. I let her in against my better judgment, only to find her opening drawers and closets, making notes on her phone. When I asked her to stop, she dropped all pretense of civility. "You have no right to keep all this for yourself. Douglas has gambling debts he needs to cover, and we are behind on our mortgage. This money could save our family." I was stunned, not by her audacity, but by the revelation about my father's gambling. It explained the constant requests for money over the years, the financial struggles despite his well-paying job. Margot seemed to realize she had said too much and quickly backtracked. "Everyone has financial difficulties sometimes," she said dismissively. "The point is, you owe your father. He gave you life. He could have put you in foster care instead of with Ellie." I asked her to leave immediately. That evening, I received a lengthy email from Dad full of guilt trips and vague legal threats. The line that cut deepest was simple. "If you force me to choose between my son and my wife, you know who I will pick. I have done it before." I broke down that night, sobbing in the kitchen, where Grandma had made me countless meals and helped me with homework. Was fighting worth losing? What little relationship I had with my only living parent. Should I just give them some money to make it all go away? For a moment, I considered surrender. The next morning I woke with Grandma's voice clear in my mind. Never give away your self-respect, Virgil. It is the one thing no one can take from you without permission. I called the estate attorney and requested a formal cease and desist letter be sent to both Dad and Margot. It outlined the legal strength of the will, referenced their harassment, and made it clear that any further attempts to claim the inheritance would result in legal action. Margot responded by launching a social media campaign painting me as a greedy, ungrateful son who was denying his siblings their rightful inheritance. She posted childhood photos of me that I did not even know Dad had kept with captions like, "Family should help family and blood is thicker than water." Instead of engaging in her drama, I decided to honor Grandma in my own way. I used part of the inheritance to establish a nursing scholarship in her name at the local community college. The Ellie Patterson Memorial Scholarship would help single parents and grandparents pursuing nursing degrees, just as Grandma had helped me pursue my education. I began renovating Grandma's house, our house. I updated the plumbing and electrical systems that had been giving her trouble but kept her garden exactly as she had designed it. I preserved her sewing room where she had spent so many happy hours making quilts for charity. The house became a blend of her loving touch and my own emerging style. 3 months after Grandma's passing, Dad showed up alone at my door. He looked older, tired, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. I invited him in cautiously, and we sat in Grandma's living room in awkward silence. "I messed up, Virgil," he finally said, his voice breaking. "Not just now with the inheritance, but 23 years ago when I left you here. And every day since." He broke down then, crying openly, in a way I had never witnessed, not even at Mom's funeral. We had a long, difficult conversation that day. He admitted to feeling overwhelmed after Mom died, to latching on to Margot because she seemed to offer an escape from his grief. He confessed to knowing it was wrong to leave me behind, but convincing himself it was temporary. Then, as years passed, it became easier to maintain distance than to face what he had done. "Margot never wanted you to be part of our family," he admitted. "She saw you as competition for my attention, for our resources. I was weak and let her dictate our relationship. I failed you in every way a father can fail a son." His honesty was both healing and painful. I did not offer forgiveness that day, but I did offer honesty in return. I told him exactly what it felt like to be abandoned, to watch from the sidelines as he created a new family, to be treated as an inconvenience rather than a son. We set boundaries that day. I would not give in to the inheritance demands, but I was willing to have a relationship with him if he respected my boundaries. This included no financial discussions, no pressure about Margot or my half-siblings, and regular, consistent communication if he wanted to rebuild trust. I began seeing a therapist to process not only my grief over Grandma, but the childhood abandonment that I had never fully addressed. Through therapy, I began to understand that while I could not change my past, I could determine how it shaped my future. My chosen family grew stronger. Friends from college and work became the support system I needed. I joined a community garden group that reminded me of hours spent with Grandma among her tomato plants. I volunteered at the library, where she had worked, reading to children whose faces lit up with the same joy I had felt when Grandma read to me. The final confrontation with Margot came 6 months after Grandma's death. I returned home from work to find evidence someone had tried to force entry through the back door. A neighbor's security camera captured Margot attempting to break in, presumably to look for valuables or documents she could use as leverage. I filed a police report and had my attorney send a final warning letter. Then I called Dad, directly making it clear this was his last chance to respect my boundaries or lose any possibility of a relationship. "You need to make a choice now, Dad. Control Margot and her actions, or I will get a restraining order against both of you." To my surprise, he chose me this time. I later learned he had begun his own therapy and was finally confronting his failures as a father and husband. He moved out of their house temporarily, forcing Margot to back down from her campaign against me. A year after Grandma's passing, I found myself in a place of unexpected peace. The inheritance had provided financial security, allowing me to continue my career without the constant stress that had marked my early years. More importantly, I had found emotional security in honoring Grandma's legacy and standing up for myself. I learned that family is not just about blood. It is about who shows up, who stays, who loves unconditionally. Grandma was more family to me than my father ever was, not because of our DNA, but because of her choices every day for 23 years. I developed a new perspective on my father as well, not excusing his actions, but understanding him as a flawed person with his own unresolved trauma. Our relationship remained fragile, but it was now built on truth rather than pretense. The most important lesson I learned through it all was about my own worth. For years, I had internalized the message that I was not worth keeping, not worth fighting for. Grandma had tried to counter that message with her love, but some wounds run too deep to be healed by others. I had to find that worth within myself by standing firm when it would have been easier to give in. If you have ever been abandoned by someone who should have loved you, if you have ever had to fight for what is rightfully yours, if you have ever had to create your own definition of family, I want you to know you are not alone. Has someone in your family ever tried to take advantage of you? Comment below and share how you handled it. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find strength in your own.